Honeybee Hollow. A beekeeper and a local journalist join forces to save the town's hives, falling for each other amid buzzing wings. Before we get to our women-loving women story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see more like this. And now, it's time for Honeybee Hollow. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wildflower meadow as Shauna Rivers checked her last hive of the day. The familiar hum that should have greeted her was replaced by an ominous silence that made her stomach clench with dread. She lifted the telescoping cover with practiced hands, but her 12 years of beekeeping experience couldn't have prepared her for what she found inside. Empty. Not just empty, devastated. The frames that should have been heavy with honey and crawling with workers hung barren and still. A few dozen bees moved sluggishly across the abandoned comb, all that remained of what had been a thriving colony of 50,000 just 3 days ago. Damn it, Shauna whispered, sinking onto the wooden hive stand. This was the 8th colony she'd lost this week, and she was running out of explanations. Colony collapse disorder was mysterious but documented. This was something else entirely. Something systematic and deliberate that was tearing through the Millbrook Valley like a plague. Her phone buzzed insistently in her back pocket. The caller ID showed Mom, but Shauna let it go to voicemail. She couldn't handle her mother's well-meaning questions about when she was going to find someone nice and settle down, or maybe consider a more stable career. Not today. Not when her life's work was literally dying around her. The sound of tires on gravel made her look up. A dusty Honda Civic was making its way up the dirt road to her property, moving too fast for the potholes and raising a small cloud of dust in its wake. Shauna frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the few people who visited her remote property knew better than to drive like they were late for something important. The car pulled up beside her pickup truck and a woman stepped out, shaking her shoulder-length auburn hair free from a messy ponytail. She wore dark jeans and a green button-down shirt that had seen better days, and she clutched a worn leather messenger bag like it contained something precious. Shauna Rivers, the woman called out, striding toward her with the kind of confident gait that suggested she was used to going places she wasn't necessarily invited. Depends who's asking, Shauna replied, standing and brushing grass off her jeans. She'd learned to be cautious with strangers, especially ones who showed up unannounced at her remote property. The woman smiled, and Shauna felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. It was a genuine smile, warm and slightly crooked, reaching her dark brown eyes in a way that suggested she didn't smile lightly. I'm Ava Morgan, reporter for the State Journal. I'm here about the bees. Shauna's guard went up immediately. I don't talk to reporters. Good thing I'm not just any reporter then. Ava pulled a business card from her shirt pocket and held it out. I specialize in environmental and agricultural stories. I heard about what's happening in the valley, and I want to help. Help? Shauna barked out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Lady, unless you've got 60,000 replacement bees in that car of yours, I don't see how you can help me. Ava didn't flinch at the sarcasm. Instead, she stepped closer, and Shauna caught a hint of coffee and something floral, jasmine, maybe. What I have is a platform. Readership across 3 states, connections at the Department of Agriculture, and a Pulitzer nomination for my series on pesticide contamination in rural communities. Despite herself, Shauna was impressed. She took the business card, noting the firm handshake when their fingers brushed. Ava's hands were soft but strong, with short, practical nails and a thin silver ring on her right index finger. Pulitzer nomination, huh? And you came all the way out here to little old Millbrook because what's happening here isn't isolated, Ava said seriously. I've been tracking similar incidents across 4 counties. Mass bee deaths, seemingly healthy colonies just gone overnight. The pattern's too consistent to be natural, and too widespread for local authorities to handle. Shauna studied the reporter's face, looking for signs of the sensationalism she'd come to expect from media types. But Ava's expression was earnest, focused, and genuinely concerned. You said you specialize in environmental stories, Shauna said slowly. What do you know about bees? Enough to know that without them, we're all screwed. Ava shifted her weight, and Shauna noticed she was wearing practical hiking boots, not the heels she might have expected from a city reporter. 30% of our food supply depends on bee pollination. Apple orchards, almond groves, vegetable crops, they all need bees to survive. If something's killing them off systematically, it's not just an agricultural problem, Shauna finished. It's an ecological disaster waiting to happen. Exactly. Ava's eyes lit up with the kind of passion Shauna recognized in herself when she talked about her work. Which is why I need someone who understands the science, someone who can explain what's really at stake here. I need a local expert who... No. Shauna turned away, walking back toward the empty hive. I don't do interviews. I don't do publicity. I keep bees, I mind my own business, and I don't need some reporter turning my personal catastrophe into entertainment for people who've never seen a hive up close. She expected Ava to argue, to push back with the typical reporter persistence. Instead, she heard footsteps on grass and then a gentle voice much closer than expected. My grandmother kept bees. Shauna turned around to find Ava standing just a few feet away, her expression soft with memory. Small operation, maybe 6 hives behind her house in Vermont. She taught me to read the weather by watching the bees' behavior, how to spot a healthy queen, the difference between the sound of a happy hive and a stressed one. Ava's voice grew quieter. She died when I was 15, and my parents sold the house. The new owners ripped out the hives and planted grass. There was something in Ava's tone, a deep sadness mixed with regret, that made Shauna's chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. I became a reporter because I wanted to tell stories that mattered, Ava continued. Stories about the things we're losing, the people who dedicate their lives to preserving something beautiful and essential. This isn't entertainment to me, Shauna. This is personal. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, and Shauna found her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She looked back at the empty hive, then at Ava's earnest face, then out across the meadow where her remaining colonies sat silent and vulnerable. How do I know you won't sensationalize this? She asked finally. Turn it into some disaster porn for people to share on social media? You don't, Ava admitted. But I can show you my previous work, let you approve quotes before publication, and promise that every word I write will be focused on finding solutions, not just documenting problems. Shauna was quiet for a long moment, listening to the too quiet afternoon air. In the distance, she could hear the faint hum of one of her surviving hives, a sound that had become increasingly precious over the past week. If I say yes, she said slowly, this has to be a partnership. I'm not just a source, I'm a collaborator. And if you write anything that makes my community look like ignorant yokels or me look like some crazy bee lady living in the woods, you'll set your remaining bees on me? Ava asked with a small smile. Something like that. Shauna found herself almost smiling back. Besides, bees don't attack unless they're threatened. They're actually remarkably gentle creatures when you understand them. I'd like to learn, Ava said simply. About the bees, about what's happening here, about how we can fix it. Shauna looked at this unexpected reporter with her grandmother's bee wisdom and her determined brown eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. It had been a long time since anyone had shown genuine interest in her work, longer still since someone had offered to help carry a burden she'd been shouldering alone. All right, she said finally. But we do this my way. And the first thing you need to understand is that if we're going to save these bees, we're going to have to get our hands dirty. Ava grinned, the expression transforming her whole face. Lead the way. As they walked toward Shauna's remaining hives, Ava pulled a small digital recorder from her messenger bag. Do you mind if I record our conversation? I find I miss important details when I'm trying to take notes and listen at the same time. Shauna hesitated, then nodded. Just remember, everything I tell you is off the record until we agree otherwise. Understood. Ava clicked the device on. So tell me what you've observed. When did you first notice something was wrong? They stopped in front of a row of white wooden boxes, and Shauna could hear the reassuring hum of active colonies. Tuesday morning, she said. I came out for my regular inspection and found Hive 12 completely silent. At first I thought maybe they'd swarmed, that's when a colony splits naturally to start a new hive. But when I opened it up, she shook her head. No evidence of disease, no sign of varroa mites, no indication of starvation. The bees were just gone. Gone as in dead, or gone as in disappeared? Both. Some dead bees scattered around the entrance, but nowhere near the number you'd expect from a full colony. It was like the majority just vanished. Shauna lifted the telescoping cover of the nearest hive, revealing frames thick with honeycomb and crawling with workers. This is what a healthy hive looks like. Ava leaned closer, and Shauna was acutely aware of her proximity, the way the afternoon sunlight caught the red highlights in her hair, the focused intensity with which she observed everything. "They're beautiful," Ava murmured. "I'd forgotten how beautiful they are." "Most people only see bees as dangerous," Shauna said, surprised by how much she wanted to share this world with someone who could appreciate it. "But they're incredibly sophisticated. They communicate through dance, regulate their hive temperature within 2 degrees, make collective decisions about everything from food sources to new nest sites." A bee landed on Ava's outstretched hand, and instead of panicking, she held perfectly still. "Hello, beautiful," she whispered. Shauna felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. Most people, including her ex-husband, had reacted to her bees with fear or annoyance. David had constantly complained about the flying insects and had been mortified when neighbors asked about her hobby at parties. "She's checking you out," Shauna said softly. "Probably wondering why you smell like jasmine." Ava glanced up with a surprised smile. "Good nose. It's my shampoo." The bee took flight, rejoining her sisters in their endless dance around the hive entrance. Shauna replaced the cover and gestured for Ava to follow her toward the small workshop attached to her barn. "So you've lost 8 colonies total?" Ava asked as they walked. "8 of my strongest hives. The pattern's consistent, healthy one day, dead or dying the next. No warning signs, no gradual decline." Shauna pulled open the workshop door, revealing walls lined with beekeeping equipment, shelves of honey jars, and a large desk covered with detailed logs and charts. "I keep meticulous records. Temperature, humidity, flower bloom cycles, harvest data going back 12 years. Ava whistled low. "This is incredible. You're like a bee librarian." "More like a bee detective lately." Shauna pulled out a thick binder and opened it to show columns of handwritten data. "Look at this. Hive 12 had a laying rate of 2,000 eggs per day as of last Sunday. Queen was young, strong, marked last spring. Honey stores were adequate, no signs of robbing from other hives. By Tuesday morning, the population had crashed by 90%. Ava studied the charts, her reporter's brain clearly processing the implications. "Have you ruled out pesticide exposure?" "First thing I checked. I work with all the local orchards on integrated pest management. They know to coordinate with beekeepers before any spray programs. Plus, pesticide poisoning usually shows specific symptoms. This is different." "What about environmental factors? Weather changes, electromagnetic interference, that sort of thing?" Shauna was impressed by the quality of Ava's questions. Most people assumed bee deaths were simple, easily explained. "Weather's been stable. No unusual solar activity, no new cell towers or power lines. I've tested for everything I can think of." Ava was quiet for a moment, studying the data sheets. "You said this isn't isolated to your property. How widespread are we talking?" "Tom Brennan lost 18 hives this week. The Henderson farm lost 12. Sarah Martinez down in the valley bottom lost everything, 25 colonies." Shauna's voice grew heavy. "We're talking about hundreds of thousands of bees, Ava. Maybe millions." The weight of those numbers settled between them like a physical presence. Ava looked up from the charts, and Shauna saw her own fear and determination reflected in those dark eyes. "What happens if this keeps spreading?" Ava asked quietly. Shauna walked to the window that overlooked the valley, where apple orchards stretched toward the distant mountains. Those orchards depend on bees for pollination. Without bees, no apples. No apples, no income for dozens of families. No income, people leave. The town dies. And it's not just Millbrook. No. If this is happening across multiple counties like you said, we're looking at a cascade effect. Agricultural collapse, economic devastation, ecological breakdown. Shauna turned back to face Ava. The question isn't what happens if this keeps spreading. The question is, how do we stop it? Ava was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against her messenger bag. I need to see more data. Talk to other beekeepers, agricultural extension agents, maybe some entomologists at the state university. Can you help me make those connections? You're really going to stick around for this? Shauna asked, studying Ava's face for signs of the inevitable retreat. In her experience, people were enthusiastic about helping until they realized how much work was actually involved. Shauna, my grandmother used to tell me that bees were the canaries in the coal mine of the natural world. If they're dying like this, it's not just about honey or even pollination. It's a warning about something much bigger. Ava's voice was steady, resolved. I'm not going anywhere until we figure out what that something is. The certainty in her voice sent an unexpected warmth through Shauna's chest. It had been so long since someone had offered to share the burden of caring about something she loved. All right, Shauna said. But if we're going to be partners on this, you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't going to be a quick weekend story. It could take weeks, maybe months to get to the bottom of this. I've got vacation time saved up, Ava said with a grin. And my editor owes me for the overtime I put in on the water contamination series last month. Where are you planning to stay? The nearest hotel is 40 minutes away in the county seat. Ava's confidence flickered slightly. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. I drove straight here after getting the tip about bee deaths in the valley. Shauna found herself speaking before she could think better of it. I've got a guest room. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and quiet. And you'd be right here if something happens to the remaining hives. The offer surprised them both. Shauna hadn't had anyone stay in her house since the divorce, had carefully cultivated a solitary existence that felt safe and controlled. But something about Ava, her genuine concern for the bees, her willingness to commit time and energy to a problem most people would ignore, made the invitation feel natural. Are you sure? Ava asked. I don't want to impose, and I know we just met. You're not imposing. Besides, if we're going to solve this mystery, we'll need to work closely together. Might as well be practical about it. Ava's smile was radiant. Thank you. That's incredibly generous. Don't thank me yet. I get up at 5:30 to check the hives, I don't have cable television, and my coffee is strong enough to dissolve metal. Sounds perfect, Ava laughed. Fair warning though, I talk to myself when I'm writing, I'm addicted to terrible reality TV on my laptop, and I make really good pancakes. The easy banter felt surprisingly natural, and Shauna realized she was actually looking forward to having company. When was the last time someone had made her laugh? Come on, she said, closing the record book. Let me show you where you'll be staying. Then we can plan our strategy for tomorrow. As they walked toward the house, a pickup truck rumbled up the driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust. Shauna recognized Tom Brennan's ancient Ford and felt her stomach clench. Tom didn't make social calls, especially not in the middle of the afternoon when he should be tending his own hives. The truck came to a stop with a wheeze of old brakes, and Tom Brennan climbed out slowly. His weathered face was grim beneath his faded baseball cap, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone carrying bad news. Shauna, he called out, nodding briefly at Ava. We got a problem. How bad? Shauna asked, though she could already read the answer in the slump of his shoulders. Lost 6 more hives overnight. That brings my total to 24. Tom pulled off his cap and ran a hand through his graying hair. But that's not the worst of it. Got a call from Bill Henderson about an hour ago. His remaining colonies are showing signs of distress. Shauna's chest tightened. The Henderson farm was 5 miles away, if the problem was spreading that far, that fast. What kind of signs? She asked. Erratic flight patterns, aggressive behavior, queens going off laying. Tom's eyes flicked to Ava with obvious curiosity. Bill's been keeping bees for 30 years. Never seen anything like it. Tom, this is Ava Morgan, Shauna said quickly. She's a reporter with the State Journal, specializing in environmental stories. She's here to help us get attention for what's happening. Tom's expression shifted from curiosity to suspicion. Reporter, huh? You here to make us look like a bunch of backwards farmers who don't know how to take care of our bees? Actually, I'm here because my grandmother was a beekeeper, Ava said calmly. And because what's happening in this valley is part of a larger pattern that threatens agricultural communities across the state. Tom studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to some internal decision. Well, if you're gonna write about this mess, you might as well see the worst of it. Bill's called a meeting for tonight at the Grange Hall. Every beekeeper in the county's invited. What time? Shauna asked. 7 o'clock. And Shauna? Tom's voice grew heavier. Bring your records. All of them. We need to figure out if there's a pattern we're missing. After Tom left, Shauna and Ava stood in the driveway, both processing the implications of what they'd just heard. 24 hives, Ava said quietly. How many bees is that? Roughly 1.5 million, Shauna replied, her voice hollow. Gone in less than a week. Ava pulled out her phone and started typing notes. I need to contact my editor, let her know this story is bigger than we initially thought. And I should reach out to some sources at the Agricultural Extension Office, see if they've had reports from other areas. Good idea. I'll gather my records and call the other local beekeepers, make sure everyone knows about tonight's meeting. Shauna paused, looking at Ava with something that might have been gratitude. I'm glad you're here. The simple statement seemed to catch them both off guard. Ava looked up from her phone, and for a moment, Shauna felt the full force of those dark eyes focused entirely on her. I'm glad I'm here too, Ava said softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither quite recognized. Then Shauna cleared her throat and turned toward the house. Come on, let me show you that guest room. We've got a lot of work to do before tonight. The house was exactly what Ava had expected, a modest 2-story farmhouse with wide plank floors, exposed beams, and windows that let in generous amounts of natural light. Everything was clean and functional, with touches that revealed Shauna's personality, bookshelves lined with volumes on entomology and sustainable agriculture, photographs of stunning bee colonies and wildflower meadows, jars of golden honey lined up on the kitchen counter like liquid sunshine. Guest rooms up here, Shauna said, leading Ava up a narrow staircase. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, and there are extra towels in the linen closet. The guest room was simple but comfortable, with a double bed covered in a handmade quilt, a small desk beneath the window, and a dresser that had been painted a soft sage green. The window overlooked the bee yard, offering a perfect view of the hives nestled among wildflowers and apple trees. It's perfect, Ava said, setting her messenger bag on the desk. Thank you again for this. I know having a stranger in your house can't be easy. Shauna leaned against the doorframe, and Ava noticed how the afternoon light highlighted the gold flecks in her green eyes. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've had company. I'd forgotten how nice it is to have someone to talk to about all this. Occupational hazard of being passionate about something most people don't understand, Ava said. My ex-girlfriend used to complain that I cared more about my stories than I did about her. The words slipped out before Ava could think better of them, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't meant to mention Rachel, hadn't meant to casually out herself within hours of meeting Shauna. But something about this woman's straightforward manner made her want to be equally honest. If Shauna was surprised by the revelation, she didn't show it. Was she right? Partially, Ava admitted. I do get obsessed with stories that matter to me. But she never understood that the work wasn't just a job, it was a calling. She wanted me to write fluff pieces about restaurant openings and society galas because they were safer and more marketable. Sounds like you were incompatible on a fundamental level, Shauna observed. Yeah, we were. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, surprised by how easy it was to talk to Shauna. What about you? Ever been married? Once. Divorced 2 years ago. Shauna's expression grew carefully neutral. He wanted me to give up the bees, said it was an unseemly hobby for a doctor's wife. You were married to a doctor who didn't understand the importance of pollinators? Ava asked incredulously. Shauna's laugh was bitter. David was an orthopedic surgeon. Very focused on fixing broken bones and making money. He tolerated the bees as long as I kept them in perspective, but when I started expanding the operation, started talking about making it a full-time business. She shrugged. Let's just say we had different visions for our future. I'm sorry, Ava said, and meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was. But it also taught me something important about compromise. There are some things you can't ask someone to give up without asking them to give up part of themselves. Shauna straightened, clearly ready to change the subject. Anyway, that's ancient history. Right now, we need to focus on saving the bees that are still alive. Ava nodded, recognizing the deflection but respecting the boundary. What do you need me to do? Can you handle calling the Agricultural Extension office while I organize my records? I want to have everything ready for tonight's meeting, dates, locations, colony sizes, everything that might help us identify a pattern. Absolutely. What should I ask them? Whether they've had similar reports from other counties, what resources they can offer for investigation, if they have any theories about causation. Shauna handed Ava a sticky note with a phone number. Ask for Dr. Jennifer Walsh. She's the state apiarist. If anyone has insights into what we're dealing with, it's her. As Shauna headed downstairs to gather her records, Ava found herself staring out the guest room window at the hives in the distance. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bee yard, and she could see the tiny figures of worker bees moving in and out of the entrances like purposeful spirits. Her grandmother had been right, there was something deeply peaceful about watching bees go about their ancient work. But knowing that colonies were dying all around the valley, that this pastoral scene might be temporary, filled Ava with a sense of urgency she hadn't felt since her first major investigative piece. She pulled out her phone and dialed Dr. Walsh's number, mentally organizing the questions she needed to ask. Whatever was killing the bees in Millbrook Valley, she was going to help Shauna stop it. And maybe, in the process, she'd figure out why being around this quiet, passionate beekeeper made her feel more grounded than she had in months. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's voice was crisp and professional when she answered on the second ring. State Apiarist Office, this is Jennifer. Dr. Walsh, my name is Ava Morgan. I'm a reporter with the State Journal, and I'm calling about the bee deaths in Millbrook Valley. There was a pause. Are you the journalist who wrote the pesticide contamination series last year? Yes, that's me. Good work on that piece. It helped push through some important regulatory changes. Dr. Walsh's tone warmed slightly. What can you tell me about Millbrook? Ava quickly summarized what she'd learned from Shauna and Tom, emphasizing the rapid timeline and unusual pattern of colony loss. As she spoke, she could hear Dr. Walsh typing notes. You said the beekeeper, Shauna Rivers, has detailed records going back 12 years? Incredibly detailed. Temperature logs, queen marking records, harvest data, health assessments. She's meticulous. I know Shauna by reputation. She's one of the most knowledgeable beekeepers in the region. Dr. Walsh paused. Ms. Morgan, what you're describing matches reports I've received from 3 other counties in the past 10 days. We're looking at something unprecedented. Ava's pulse quickened. What kind of reports? Mass colony collapse with no apparent cause. Healthy hives going silent overnight. No evidence of disease, mites, or typical environmental stressors. Dr. Walsh's voice grew grim. We've lost an estimated 2 million bees across 4 counties. The pattern suggests either a new pathogen we haven't identified or some kind of environmental contamination. What kind of contamination? That's what we're trying to determine. I've got a team from the university coming out tomorrow to collect samples, soil, water, plant matter, anything that might give us clues. Can you ask Shauna if she'd be willing to let them examine her affected hives? I'm sure she would. There's actually a meeting tonight with all the local beekeepers. Would it be helpful if you attended? I wish I could, but I'm tied up with the investigation in Cedar County. However, Dr. Walsh paused, and Ava could hear papers rustling. There is something else. We've been working with a research team from the Agricultural College, and they've developed a theory that might explain what we're seeing. Ava grabbed a pen from the desk drawer. What kind of theory? Have you heard of neonicotinoid pesticides? Vaguely. They're supposed to be bee-safe, right? That's what the manufacturers claim. But recent research suggests that even sublethal doses can have devastating effects on bee behavior and colony health. The problem is, these chemicals can persist in the environment for years, building up in soil and groundwater. Ava was scribbling notes as fast as she could. Are you saying someone's been using illegal pesticides? Not necessarily illegal, but possibly misapplied. Or it could be cumulative exposure from multiple sources over time. Dr. Walsh's voice grew more urgent. The thing is, neonicotinoid contamination doesn't always show obvious symptoms. Colonies can appear healthy right up until they collapse completely. That matches what Shauna described: healthy hives one day, dead the next. Exactly. Ms. Morgan, if you're investigating this story, I need you to understand something. If we're dealing with widespread neonicotinoid contamination, this isn't just about bees. These chemicals can affect all pollinators, butterflies, native bees, even birds. We could be looking at an ecological disaster. The weight of those words settled in Ava's stomach like lead. What do you need from us? Documentation. Photos, data, witness statements. And I need Shauna to preserve any dead bees she's collected. We'll need them for tissue analysis. Can you make sure she knows that? Absolutely. I'll email you my direct contact information and some research papers about neonicotinoid effects. Share them with Shauna and the other beekeepers. The more they understand about what we might be dealing with, the better they can help us gather evidence. After ending the call, Ava sat staring at her notes, her mind racing. Neonicotinoids. Chemical contamination. Ecological disaster. The story was bigger than she'd initially imagined, and the stakes were higher than anyone in the valley probably realized. She could hear Shauna moving around downstairs, the sound of file cabinets opening and closing, papers being shuffled. Ava made her way down to find Shauna at the kitchen table, surrounded by binders, charts, and photographs. Any luck with Dr. Walsh? Shauna asked without looking up from a detailed map covered in colored pins. More than I expected. Ava sat down across from her, noting how Shauna had organized everything with scientific precision. She says what's happening here matches reports from 3 other counties. We're talking about 2 million dead bees across 4 counties. Shauna's head snapped up. 2 million. And she thinks it might be neonicotinoid contamination. Neonics? Shauna's expression grew thoughtful. That would explain the sudden collapse pattern. Those chemicals interfere with bee navigation and communication. A colony can seem healthy until the foragers can't find their way home. Dr. Walsh is sending a research team tomorrow to collect samples. She wants to examine your affected hives if you're willing. Of course. Shauna gestured to the map spread between them. I've been plotting the locations of all reported colony losses. Look at this pattern. Ava leaned closer, aware of Shauna's proximity, the faint scent of honey and wildflowers that seemed to follow her. The map showed the Millbrook Valley with colored pins marking dead hives, red for Shauna's property, blue for Tom's, green for the Hendersons, and yellow for several other locations. They're not random, Ava observed. There's a clear geographic cluster. Exactly. And look at this. Shauna pulled out a transparency sheet and laid it over the map. It showed the watershed for the valley, with streams and underground water sources marked in blue. The affected apiaries are all downstream from the same water source. Ava felt excitement building in her chest. This is it, isn't it? The connection we needed. It's a theory. If there's contamination in the watershed, it would explain why the deaths are clustered geographically and happening so rapidly. Shauna's eyes were bright with the thrill of discovery. But we need more data to prove it. What kind of data? Water samples from upstream and downstream locations. Soil samples from affected and unaffected properties. Plant tissue analysis from flowers the bees have been foraging on. Shauna was already making lists, her scientific mind shifting into high gear. And we need to map every agricultural operation upstream from the affected area. Ava watched Shauna work, impressed by her methodical approach and obvious expertise. This wasn't just a hobbyist beekeeper, this was a scientist who understood complex systems and knew how to investigate them. Shauna, she said quietly. Yes? Dr. Walsh mentioned that if this is neonicotinoid contamination, it's not just about bees. It could affect all pollinators, maybe even birds. Shauna's pen stilled on the paper. An ecological cascade. Is that as bad as it sounds? Worse. Shauna set down her pen and looked directly at Ava. Pollinators support about 35% of global food production. If we lose them, we don't just lose honey and beeswax. We lose apples, almonds, berries, melons, squash. We lose the wildflowers that feed other insects, the insects that feed birds, the birds that control pest populations. The magnitude of the potential disaster was staggering. Ava found herself thinking about her grandmother's small bee yard, about all the ecosystems that depended on those tiny, industrious creatures. How do we stop it? She asked. First, we prove what's causing it. Then we find the source and shut it down. Shauna's voice was determined. But we need help. More resources than a small town meeting can provide. What if we could get state-level attention? Media coverage that forces officials to take action? Shauna looked at her with something that might have been hope. You think you can do that? I think we can do that, Ava corrected. You've got the science, I've got the platform. Together, we might just be able to save what's left of your bees. The word together hung between them, carrying more weight than either had intended. Shauna felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the possibility of genuine partnership, professional and maybe something more. We should probably head to the Grange Hall, Shauna said, glancing at the clock. The meeting starts in half an hour. Right. Ava stood, gathering her notes and recorder. Shauna? Yeah? Thank you for trusting me with this. I know it's not easy to let a stranger into something so personal. Shauna looked at this woman who'd appeared in her life just hours ago but somehow felt like someone she'd been waiting for. You're not a stranger anymore. The Millbrook Grange Hall hadn't seen this many people since the annual Honey Festival. Pickup trucks and sedans filled the gravel parking lot, and warm lights spilled from the windows into the gathering dusk. As Shauna and Ava approached the front steps, they could hear the low murmur of worried voices inside. Nervous? Shauna asked, noticing Ava checking her recorder for the third time. A little. I want to make sure I get this right. Ava paused at the door. These are your people, your community. I don't want to say anything that makes the situation worse. The consideration in her voice made Shauna's chest warm. Just be yourself. You've already impressed Tom, and he doesn't trust anyone easily. Inside, the hall was packed with familiar faces. Shauna recognized nearly everyone, beekeepers she'd known for years, orchard owners who depended on pollination services, farmers whose crops would suffer without healthy bee populations. The air hummed with anxiety and determination. Bill Henderson stood at the front of the room, his weathered hands gripping the podium. At 68, he was the unofficial elder statesman of the local beekeeping community, and his 30 years of experience commanded respect from everyone present. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Bill began, his voice carrying easily across the room. I know most of you have heard the rumors, but I want to start with facts. As of this afternoon, we've confirmed colony losses on 12 properties across the valley. Total count is approaching 100 hives. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Shauna felt Ava tense beside her as the magnitude of the disaster became clear. Tom Brennan has lost 24 colonies, Bill continued. Shauna Rivers has lost 12. The Martinez farm reported 8 dead hives this morning. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Folks, in 40 years of keeping bees, I've never seen anything like this. A hand shot up from the middle of the room. What about the extension office? Have they given us any guidance? That's why I asked Shauna to speak tonight, Bill said, gesturing toward her. She's been in contact with the state apiarist. Shauna? All eyes turned toward her, and Shauna felt the familiar flutter of performance anxiety. She'd never been comfortable speaking in public, preferring the quiet company of her bees to crowds of people. But as she looked around the room at these worried faces, people whose livelihoods were disappearing along with their colonies, she found her voice. I spoke with Dr. Jennifer Walsh this afternoon, she began, standing slowly. The good news is, we're not alone. The state is taking this seriously. What's the bad news? Tom called out from the back. The bad news is, this isn't isolated to Millbrook. Similar colony collapses have been reported in 3 other counties. We're looking at a regional crisis. The room erupted in worried murmurs. Shauna held up her hand for quiet. But Dr. Walsh has a theory about what might be causing this, and more importantly, she's sending a research team to help us investigate. Shauna gestured to Ava, who stood beside her. I'd also like you to meet Ava Morgan, an environmental reporter with the State Journal. She's here to help us get the attention the situation deserves. Ava stepped forward slightly, and Shauna was struck by how confident she appeared despite her earlier nervousness. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. I know trust doesn't come easily when you're dealing with reporters, but I want you to know that my goal isn't to sensationalize your situation. It's to help you solve it. An older woman Shauna didn't recognize raised her hand. What makes you different from all the other reporters who show up when there's trouble and disappear when the cameras stop rolling? My grandmother was a beekeeper, Ava said simply. I understand what you're losing here isn't just income or even insects. It's a way of life, a relationship with the natural world that took generations to build. That's not something you can replace or rebuild quickly. The woman nodded approvingly, and Shauna felt a surge of pride at how perfectly Ava had read the room. Now, Shauna continued, Dr. Walsh thinks we might be dealing with neonicotinoid contamination. Has anyone here used neonics on their property or noticed any unusual agricultural activity upstream from their hives? The room fell quiet as people considered the question. Finally, a young man near the front raised his hand tentatively. I'm Jake Morrison, I run the organic farm on Creek Road. I haven't used any pesticides, but... He hesitated, looking around the room. There's been a lot of activity at the old Jameson place upstream from most of our properties. Shauna's pulse quickened. The Jameson property had been abandoned for years after old Harold Jameson died without heirs. What kind of activity? Trucks coming and going, looked like some kind of agricultural operation. I didn't think much of it at first, figured someone had finally bought the place and was cleaning it up. Jake shifted uncomfortably. But the timing matches when we started seeing problems with our bees. Ava was taking notes, her reporter instincts clearly engaged. Did you see what kind of trucks? Any company names or logos? Big tanker trucks, mostly. And equipment that looked like spraying rigs. Jake paused. There was one truck I remember specifically because it seemed out of place, fancy white pickup with some kind of corporate logo on the side. Can you remember anything about the logo? Shauna asked. Something with green lettering. Maybe a leaf design? I only saw it from a distance. Ava and Shauna exchanged glances. This was the first concrete lead they'd had, the first suggestion that the colony deaths might be connected to human activity rather than natural causes. Bill Henderson stepped back to the podium. This is exactly the kind of information we need to share with the state investigators. I want everyone to think back over the past few weeks, any unusual activity, any changes to normal routines, anything that might help us understand what's happening. For the next hour, the room buzzed with discussion as beekeepers compared notes and shared observations. Shauna found herself in the center of several conversations, her scientific background making her a natural coordinator for the group's efforts. As the formal meeting wound down, people began clustering in smaller groups, continuing conversations that had started during the presentation. Shauna noticed Ava moving through the crowd, introducing herself and asking thoughtful questions. She had a gift for putting people at ease, for making them feel heard and understood. "Your reporter friend seems to know what she's doing," Tom Brennan observed, appearing at Shauna's elbow with a cup of coffee. "She's not exactly my friend," Shauna said, then immediately wondered why she'd made the distinction. Tom raised an eyebrow. "No? The way you two were working together up there, I figured you'd known each other for years." Before Shauna could respond, Ava appeared beside them, slightly breathless from her circuit around the room. "This community is incredible," she said. "I've got enough material for 3 articles, and everyone I've talked to has been incredibly generous with their time and insights." "What's your next step?" Tom asked. "I want to investigate the Jameson property first thing tomorrow," Ava said. "And I need to follow up with Dr. Walsh about the research team. If we can coordinate the timing, maybe we can get water and soil samples from upstream locations before the university team arrives." "That's a good plan," Shauna agreed. "I can guide you around the watershed, show you where the streams connect and which properties are most likely to be affected." "It could be dangerous," Tom warned. "If someone's been using illegal pesticides up there, they might not appreciate visitors." Ava's expression grew determined. "Then we'll be careful. But we can't let fear stop us from investigating. Too much depends on finding answers." As they prepared to leave, Bill Henderson approached with a manila folder. "Shauna, I put together contact information for every beekeeper in the county, along with maps showing property locations and approximate hive counts. Thought you and Ms. Morgan might find it useful." "This is incredibly helpful, thank you," Shauna said, accepting the folder. "Just bring our bees home safe," Bill said quietly. Walking back to the truck in the cool evening air, Shauna felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The meeting had made clear just how many people were counting on her and Ava to find solutions. Entire families, generations of agricultural tradition, an ecosystem that had taken decades to establish, all of it hanging in the balance. "Overwhelmed?" Ava asked, seeming to read her thoughts. "Terrified," Shauna admitted. "What if we can't figure this out? What if the contamination is too widespread to fix, or the damage is already irreversible?" Ava stopped walking and turned to face her. In the dim light from the Grange Hall windows, her expression was serious but not without hope. "Then we'll have tried everything we could," she said simply. "But Shauna, I've covered a lot of environmental disasters, and I've learned something important. The communities that survive them are the ones that refuse to give up, that keep asking questions and demanding answers even when the situation seems hopeless. And you think Millbrook is that kind of community?" "I think you are that kind of person," Ava said softly. "And from what I saw tonight, you're not alone." The sincerity in her voice, the warmth in her dark eyes, made Shauna's heart do something complicated in her chest. Standing here in the parking lot of the Grange Hall, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of home, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before her divorce. The possibility of genuine partnership with someone who understood what mattered to her. "We should get some rest," Shauna said finally, not quite trusting herself to say what she was really thinking. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As they drove home through the valley, past sleeping orchards and silent hives, both women were quiet with their own thoughts. But the silence between them felt comfortable now, charged with shared purpose and the beginning of something that might grow into trust. Or maybe something more. Back at Shauna's house, they sat at the kitchen table with laptops, coffee, and the folder Bill had given them. Ava was typing notes from the meeting while Shauna spread out topographical maps of the watershed. "Look at this," Shauna said, tracing a blue line with her finger. "Miller Creek runs right through the old Jameson property before flowing past most of the affected apiaries." Ava leaned closer to see the map, and Shauna caught that hint of jasmine again, mixed with something warmer now, the scent of Ava's skin after a long day. Their shoulders brushed as Ava pointed to a spot upstream. If someone's been dumping chemicals here, Ava said, the contamination would flow directly to every single affected property, Shauna finished. God, how did I miss something so obvious? Because you were focused on your bees, not playing detective. Ava's voice was gentle. That's what I'm here for. Their eyes met across the map, and Shauna felt that flutter in her chest intensify. There was something about the way Ava looked at her, with respect, admiration, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. Ava, she said softly, I need to tell you something. What? When I agreed to work with you on this story, I thought it was just about saving the bees. But sitting here tonight, watching you connect with my community, seeing how much you care. Shauna took a shaky breath. I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time. Ava's expression grew tender. Shauna. I know we just met, and I know this is probably terrible timing with everything that's happening, but I had to. Ava reached across the table and covered Shauna's hand with her own. I was hoping you'd say something like that. You were? I've been fighting the urge to kiss you since this afternoon, Ava admitted, her cheeks flushing. But I didn't want to complicate things while you're dealing with losing your colonies. Shauna felt her heart leap. You want to kiss me? Instead of answering, Ava stood and walked around the table. Shauna rose to meet her, and suddenly they were standing close enough to touch, close enough that Shauna could see the gold flecks in Ava's dark eyes. Is this okay? Ava whispered. By way of answer, Shauna cupped Ava's face in her hands and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, but when Ava melted into her with a small sigh, Shauna deepened the kiss. Ava's lips were warm and sweet, and when her arms came up to circle Shauna's waist, pulling her closer, Shauna felt something inside her chest bloom open like a flower in sunlight. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching. I can't remember the last time I felt this way about someone, Shauna whispered. Me neither, Ava replied, her thumb stroking across Shauna's cheekbone. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm just a beekeeper. You're a woman who's dedicated her life to protecting something essential and beautiful. You're brilliant and passionate and... Ava smiled. And you taste like honey. Shauna laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. That's probably because I eat way too much of my own product. They might have kissed again, but Ava's phone buzzed insistently on the table. She glanced at it and frowned. Text from my editor. She wants an update on the story. What are you going to tell her? That we're close to a breakthrough. Ava picked up her phone, then hesitated. Shauna, what happens after we solve this? I live 3 hours away, my job is. We'll figure it out, Shauna said firmly. Whatever this is between us, it's worth figuring out. The next morning brought Dr. Walsh's research team and confirmation of their worst fears. Water samples from Miller Creek showed dangerous levels of neonicotinoid contamination, and soil tests revealed illegal dumping of concentrated pesticide waste. The investigation that followed moved quickly once state environmental agencies got involved. The abandoned Jameson property had been used as an illegal disposal site by AgriCorp Solutions, a chemical company that had been quietly dumping pesticide waste rather than paying for proper disposal. Within a week, arrests were made, cleanup efforts began, and Ava's series of articles had sparked a statewide investigation into chemical disposal practices. But the damage to the valley's bee colonies was severe. It would take years to fully recover the population. The good news, Dr. Walsh told them a month later, is that we caught it before the contamination spread further downstream. And some of your surviving colonies are showing signs of recovery. Shauna nodded, watching her remaining bees work among the wildflowers. She'd lost more than half her hives, but the ones that survived were slowly rebuilding. It would be a long road back, but it was a road she wouldn't have to travel alone. Ava had taken a leave of absence from the State Journal, officially to continue covering the environmental cleanup story. Unofficially, she was exploring the possibility of freelance work that would let her stay in Millbrook Valley. "I've been thinking," Ava said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky gold. "Maybe it's time I tried beekeeping again." "It's not easy work," Shauna warned, though her smile gave away her delight at the suggestion. "I have an excellent teacher," Ava replied, leaning over to kiss her. "And I hear the benefits package is pretty amazing." As spring turned to summer, new colonies were established with queens from surviving hives. The valley slowly began to hum again with the sound of bees going about their ancient work. And in the small farmhouse at the heart of it all, two women built something beautiful together, a partnership rooted in shared purpose and grown strong through trust, passion, and love. The bees, it turned out, weren't the only things in Millbrook Valley that could recover and thrive when given the right conditions and a little care. The end. If you listened to the end, thank you for being here. Would you like to hear a continuation of Shauna and Ava's story? Let me know in the comment.